Hello everyone and welcome back to the Sherlock Holmes. Now I know a lot of you use these videos to sleep, so before you drift off I thought it would be a fun idea if everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world. Also like and subscribe if you are enjoying the case. Right, let's get comfy and relax and let's begin. Story 1. China is a vast and populous nation holding the title of the most populous country in the world. For a long time, there have been strict customs and views related to marriage. However, in recent times, people have gradually become more open. Although some regions still hold on to traditional customs, this has made it more challenging for men and women to find suitable partners for dating and marriage to facilitate easier encounters between men and women. Mobile dating apps and matchmaking services have emerged. Recognizing this trend, many TV stations have organized programs to serve as a bridge for men and women. The goal is not only to create opportunities for them to meet, but also to help them find their true love. After these programs, many couples have found lasting happiness. However, in early August 2012, the body of a man suspected to be the husband of a female contestant who had participated in a dating show was discovered in an elevator in an apartment complex. His body had numerous open wounds and the victim died due to severe blood loss and a ruptured heart. Vin, the main character in this case, is a woman named Wang Jia. She was born on October 5th, 1979, middle-class family in Yan'an, Shanxi Province, China. Her father was a real estate manager and her mother was a pharmacist. Wang Jia was an only child growing up surrounded by love and protection from her family. In 1998, Wang Jia was admitted to Northwest University, majoring in Chinese literature there. She actively participated in school activities, became the head editor of the school magazine, and received numerous awards after graduating from University. Wang Jia worked as a book editor at a publishing company, coming from a well-off family and being highly accomplished herself. Wang Jia had long set high standards when choosing a partner. Although she had been in 2 relationships, she did not consider either partner suitable for marriage, which led to her remaining single. Until she was 31 years old, Wang Jia's family began to worry as they noticed she was not finding the man she wanted to marry. They often pressured her, which made Wang Jia feel stressed on top of that. Seeing her friends around her getting married and having children, she started to think more seriously about finding a partner. Around this time, her grandfather's health began to deteriorate and he passed away. Not long after, his long-held wish was to see Wang Jia get married. However, by the time he passed, she had not yet married. This saddened her deeply, and she decided to fulfill her late grandfather's wish. This reflects a common belief in China. Children often follow the wishes of their grandparents and parents. One day, Wang Jia happened to watch the show If You Are the One. This is one of China's most famous dating programs. Each episode features 24 female contestants looking for love. The show recruits male contestants, and various segments are designed to facilitate connections between the participants. First, the male contestant introduces himself to the female contestants, sharing details such as age, occupation, personality, and life views. If the women are impressed, they turn on their lights for the man. The man also has the option to turn off the lights for any woman he doesn't feel compatible with, couples who have mutual interest, and keep their lights on. Move on to the face-to-face segment of the show to get to know each other better. Wang Jia was captivated by the sweet and romantic confessions on the game show. She became deeply immersed and yearned to be the main character herself. So she decided to participate in the show to find true love. However, at that time, many popular dating shows in China faced criticism from online communities. For their lack of authenticity, critics believed the shows were scripted and that the contestants had memorized their lines before filming. There were many debates surrounding the focus on money and fame expressed by contestants on the show. Additionally, some participants joined the show merely to promote themselves and gain publicity rather than to genuinely seek love. However, Wang Jia didn't concern herself with these issues. She was determined to participate in order to meet successful and wealthy men. She wanted to marry someone perfect, believing that the contestants on the show had been carefully selected by April 2011. Wang Jia was officially chosen to participate in If You Are the One. At that time, she was the second female contestant in episode 126 with her background in Chinese literature and her job at a publishing company, Wang Jia was articulate yet honest and straightforward. As a result, when the show aired in May 2011, Wang Jia attracted a lot of attention from the audience for her beautiful appearance and profound statements about love and life. She once said on the show, "I want to find my soulmate on this stage. I am someone who can go anywhere for love. I believe my paradise is wherever love is." Her presence left a deep impression on the viewers, however, as she began meeting the various male contestants. Almost none of them matched Wang Jia's expectations, that was, until a man named Jian Tian appeared. Jian Tian, 30 years old, was an entrepreneur from Beijing. He shared that he had been a cancer patient but had fully recovered after treatment. His business had failed multiple times and gone bankrupt, but Jiang Tian had eventually overcome these challenges and found success from the short introduction video of Jiang. It was clear that he had good financial standing. However, on such a prominent show, there were undoubtedly men with even more substantial wealth. Moreover, Jiang Tian had a history of severe illness, and his appearance was not particularly striking, which led to him not being favored by the other female contestants. However, Jiang Tian's words deeply moved Wang Jia. She decided to press the button and confess her feelings to him on stage. Her heartfelt words brought tears not only to Jiang Tian but also to the audience. In the end, Wang Jia's confession was successful. She ran to embrace Jiang Tian, and the two happily left the stage hand in hand after everything Wang Jia had been through. It seemed she had finally found true love. But little did she know that her tragedy was just beginning. At that time, Wang Jia was 32 years old. She had found a boyfriend on the dating show, and within just 2 weeks of the episode airing, her social media following had surged to nearly 10,000 people. Wang Jia's family and friends who had witnessed her successful confession on television were overjoyed and offered their blessings. But just as Wang Jia was buzzing in the happiness of finding true love, Jiang Tian suddenly disappeared. Without a trace, cutting off all communication with Wang Jia, this news quickly spread, causing a stir among netizens. Many people made derogatory comments mocking and insulting Wang Jia. She felt incredibly embarrassed and began posting sad updates on her social media. Her friends left comforting comments, and among them was someone with the nickname One who consistently offered her encouragement. This person's real name was 2 years younger than Wang Jia, and he was a bank employee in Zan. His parents were ordinary government employees. Hejian had admired Wang Jia from the early days of her participation in the dating show and had been following her activities on social media. Knowing that Wang Jia had been abandoned by the boyfriend she met on the show, Hejian sympathized with her and wanted to get closer to her in the days that followed. Hejian frequently reached out to chat and encourage Wang Jia. This gradually made Wang Jia feel happier, and she slowly developed feelings for Hejian on May 27, 2011. After some time of chatting online, the two decided to meet in person upon seeing Hejian in real life. Wang Jia was immediately attracted to his handsome appearance and height. However, when Hejian suggested that they take their relationship to a more intimate level, Wang Jia hesitated because Hejian's family background didn't meet her expectations. However, as she continued to talk and spend time with him, she was moved by his sweet attentiveness. Eventually, Wang Jia accepted his romantic advances, and their relationship quickly grew close. Wang Jia's social media was filled with sweet moments between her and Hejian. Since both were in their 30s, they wanted to move quickly towards marriage. However, Wang Jia were not entirely pleased with Hejian, mainly because he was younger than her, but Wang Jia believed that the age difference wasn't an issue for them. She firmly decided to marry Hejian on New Year's Day 2012. Seeing their daughter's determination, Wang Jia's parents had no choice but to go along with her decision. However, things didn't turn out as smoothly as Wang Jia had hoped. After some time, Wang Jia discovered that Hejian wasn't a senior employee, but just an ordinary worker at the bank. Moreover, the house Hejian had bought was under a mortgage, and he still had a significant debt to pay off. These revelations began to shake Wang Jia's resolve during this period. Wang Ji reconnected with several female contestants she had met on the dating show they shared. Envious stories about the wealthy men they had met how they had become famous, secured advertising contracts, published books, and gained considerable public recognition after the show, Wang Jia started to feel inferior compared to them. At this point, many why questions began to plague her mind. Why, while other contestants had their lives transformed, was she about to marry a regular office worker? Why would she have to take on his mortgage? Dead WJ gradually grew to resent Heejun to avoid marrying him. She started inventing excuses to postpone the wedding repeatedly. Then one day, Wang Jia decided to unilaterally cancel the wedding plans with Heejun. However, around the same time, she discovered signs that she might be pregnant. By this point, Wang Jia was over 30 years old, and people advised her to keep the baby. They warned that having an abortion could lead to significant health consequences. So on January 31st, 2012, Wang Jia and Heejun registered their marriage because of the baby. Their wedding was held in April 2012. After the wedding, Wang Jia took a leave of absence from work to stay home and focus on her pregnancy. All the financial burdens now fell on Heejun to provide a better life for his wife and child. Heejun took on a part-time job after his regular work at the bank to earn extra income. One might think this would make Wang Xiao appreciate him more, but instead she grew increasing, dissatisfied, and began to look down on her husband during her free time at home. Wang Jia often scrolled through social media. She followed her friends from the dating show, some of whom flaunted new luxury handbags or boasted about their brand new expensive cars. Others posted pictures of themselves traveling to beautiful destinations, comparing herself to them. Wang Jia couldn't help but feel disheartened as her pregnancy progressed. Her belly grew larger, her body became less attractive, and her hair started to fall out more and more. She couldn't sleep, and when she looked in the mirror, she only saw a worn-out and unattractive woman. Wang Jia couldn't stop comparing herself to her friends. She felt powerless and thought, my life is over. No designer bags, no fancy cars, and I'm stuck in this house forever. As her frustration grew, she became increasingly irritable and frequently took out her anger on Heejun. In May 2012, Wang Jia received a wedding invitation from a friend who had also been on the dating show. This friend was marrying into a wealthy and prestigious family. The wedding was extravagant, with over 200 banquet tables and 30 luxury cars to escort the guests. Wang Jia compared this to her own wedding and soon after returned home to vent her anger on her husband. Heejun tried to comfort her, saying everyone has their own struggles, but Wang Jia remained furious. Pushing Heejun to his breaking point, he finally snapped and said, if you keep comparing our life to others, why don't you go back and join the show again? Wang Jia was shocked by Heejun's sarcastic remarks. Since their marriage, he had never raised his voice at her, but this time they ended up in a heated argument. Wang Jia wrote in her journal, he begged me to marry him, got me pregnant, and turned me into a stay-at-home mom with a face full of freckles and a body that's growing uglier by the day. I've become a useless woman living in my husband's house just to bear children soon after both sets of parents intervened. Trying to calm things down, Heejun took the initiative to apologize to Wang Jia. It seemed like everything had settled, but Wang Jia only became more unreasonable. As time went on, by June 2012, Wang's work became increasingly demanding, requiring him to leave early and return late. At this point, Wang Jia began to suspect that her husband was having an affair. She demanded that he Jew in hand over control of the family finances. However, after checking the bank account and finding little money, she suspected he was hiding something from her. Heejun ignored his wife's complaints, not wanting to argue. He resorted to playing video games, leaving Wang Jia to cool off on her own. He thought his silence would help her calm down, but it had the opposite effect. Worried about his daughter-in-law, Huan's father advised him to take Wang Jia to see a therapist. However, due to his busy schedule juggling multiple jobs, Heejun didn't have the time, so he asked his mother to take Wang Jia. Instead, Wang Jia went with her mother-in-law to a local clinic where she was diagnosed with mild prenatal depression and anxiety disorder. Upon learning this, Heejun realized he needed to spend more time with his wife, talk to her, and reassure her. However, despite his efforts, things did not improve. In July 2012, Wang Jia reached out to a fellow female contestant named Jay Jolly, whom she had met on the show. If You Are the One, Jay Jolly had been fortunate enough to secure a partnership with an entertainment company after the show. By the time WJA contacted her, Jay Jolly had become an artist with her own album. This only worsened Wang Jia's mental state, as she compared herself to Jay Jolly's success in the entertainment industry. On the evening of August 1st, 2012, after delivering food from his part-time job, Heejun quickly returned home to cook dinner for Wang Jia after finishing a pot of chicken soup. He called her to come eat. However, Wang Jia lay motionless on the bed, staring blankly at her laptop screen without responding. Suddenly, she said to her husband, "I don't want to live anymore." Shocked, Heejun snatched the laptop from her hands. It turned out she had been feeling hopeless after talking to a fellow female contestant from the dating show they had both been on. Frustrated, Hwan told her to stop dreaming and to face reality. This led to yet another intense argument between them. Heejun was at his wit's end with his wife. He had tried everything, taking on multiple jobs just to ensure that Wang Jia and their unborn child could have a better life. Yet his wife showed no gratitude, looking at him with nothing but disdain. In a moment of anger, Heejun yelled, "I don't even know why I'm doing all this anymore." After that, he sadly ate dinner alone, took a shower, and went to bed. Little did he know that night would be his last Wang Jia. His wife was filled with a broken heart and a mind consumed with hatred for her husband. At 3 a.m. on August 2nd, 2012, while Heejun was sound asleep, Wang Jia went into the kitchen and grabbed a sharp tool M for healing fruit. Initially, she had gone to the kitchen out of hunger, but holding that object in her hand, her thoughts took a dark turn. Wang Jia slowly approached the bed where Heejun was lying. Her eyes full of resentment, she raised the knife with both hands, waking up. Suddenly, in excruciating pain, Heejun looked at his wife and said, "Honey, what are you doing? Why are you doing this to me because Wang Jia was pregnant?" Heejun didn't fight back. Clutching his wound, he ran out into the hallway to seek help. Wang Jia followed closely behind in agony. He pleaded with her to stop, but by then Wang Jia had completely lost her mind. She continued to attack her husband with deep, painful wounds. Heejun managed to reach the elevator as the doors opened. He could no longer endure the pain and collapsed inside. Wang Jia chased her husband into the elevator. It was only then that she realized the horrifying act she had just committed. Seeing Heejun in critical condition, she immediately ran back into the apartment and called 911, and the police. Initially, Wang Jia had planned to kill Heejun and then take her own life. But as she looked at her husband's cold, lifeless body, she suddenly abandoned that idea. Wang Jia carefully staged the scene to make it look like a case of domestic violence. Hoping to receive a lighter sentence due to the severity of his injuries, Heejun did not survive. Wang Jia was arrested and taken to the police station. During the interrogation, she repeatedly tried to justify her actions. However, based on the evidence collected at the scene, the police knew her story was far from the truth. Wang Jia was detained shortly after, but because she was about to give birth, she was released on bail 2 weeks after the incident. Wang Jia gave birth to a baby boy at the hospital. Once her health had fully stabilized, the police came to arrest her when the baby was taken away from his mother and placed elsewhere. Wang Jia finally felt a deep sense of remorse based on both her previous and current medical records. Doctors concluded that she suffered from depression and had been excessively agitated before committing the crime. Huan's parents were devastated but decided to forgive her, thinking of their grandson. Wang Jia was ordered to pay compensation of 30,000 yuan, approximately $4,300, in April 2013. Wang Jia's case went to trial. The court handed down a relatively lenient sentence due to her diagnosed depression and the victim's family's decision to forgive her and not pursue further legal action. She was sentenced to 13 years in prison, which was later reduced to 10 years on appeal. It is evident that Wang Jia's relationship with Heejun was not entirely driven by love. Deep down, she continued to hope for a wealthy and successful husband. When reality failed to meet her expectations, she constantly compared herself to others around her. This led Wang Jia to grow increasingly resentful of her husband. But would a wealthy man have truly brought Wang Jia The happiness she longed for money can certainly provide a better quality of life, but without love and sincerity, can luxury truly bring lasting happiness? If Wang Jia had stopped comparing herself to others, if she had been more willing to listen to Cher and to empathize with her husband, perhaps they could have had a happy life together with their little child. Unfortunately, tragedy took the place of what could have been a beautiful life. The story of Huan's death and his relationship with Wang Jia sparked a widespread discussion on Chinese social media. Some people sympathized with her, while many others criticized her actions. Given the attention Wang Jia received after her appearance on the dating show, public interest in the case continued for some time afterward. Story 2: on June 30th, 2019, a 39-year-old man named Yunan Yup, along with his wife and a few friends, went on a picnic at Gapeng Valley, located in Gapeng County in the heart of Gyeonggi Province, South Korea. This area is a popular tourist destination due to its proximity to downtown Seoul and convenient transportation. It attracts many visitors. One of the well-known attractions in Gapeng is Longsi Waterfall. What was supposed to be a joyful and unforgettable trip turned into a meticulously planned and cunning murder around 8 p.m. Yunan Yup suddenly fell into the stream and drowned. At the time of the incident, neither his wife nor his friends noticed what had happened, missing the critical moment to rescue him. It wasn't until later that they discovered Yun had passed away. His friends quickly reported the incident to the police. After conducting an investigation, the police determined that Yun's death was accidental with no signs of external force. As a result, they concluded that it was a typical drowning accident with no suspects involved. Despite the accident occurring at a famous tourist spot, the incident quickly faded from public memory, with many people unaware. It had even happened however, in November, Yun Sung-yup's wife Loon Hai registered to appear on the South Korean TV show Unanswered Questions. This show is quite popular for exposing troubling issues within South Korean society. During the program, Leon Hai accused a South Korean insurance company of repeatedly refusing to pay out the insurance money following her husband's death. Before his passing, Yoon Sang-yup had purchased an insurance policy in the event of an accident. Or his death, the insurance company was obligated to pay 800 million won, equivalent to approximately $600,000, to his next of kin. In the months following her husband's death, Leon Hai persistently requested the insurance company to release this payment. However, the company refused, suspecting her involvement in her husband's accident. The reporter's investigation was officially broadcast, immediately sparking heated debates within the community. The production team also shared the investigation results with the police. In February 2021, South Korean police decided to reopen the investigation into the drowning incident in Gapeng. After 9 months of thorough research and investigation, the prosecution finally released their official findings. So what is the truth here? Let's revisit the events of that day on June 30th, 2019. Lei Unai organized a trip to Gapeng Valley for a group of 7 people. First, we need to clarify the relationships among these 7 individuals. The first couple was Lee Unai and her husband Yunan Yup. The second couple consisted of a man named Lee and his girlfriend Choi. The third couple was Kim and his girlfriend Lee. Finally, there was Cho Han-soo. We need to pay special attention to Cho Han-soo. Not only was he the same age as Leon Hai, but he also had a very close relationship with her. Yes, they were secretly involved with each other. Yun Sang-yup was, of course, unaware that his wife was cheating on him. Furthermore, she was also secretly involved with the man named Lee out of the 7 people on this trip, aside from his wife Leon Hai. Yun and Yup did not know anyone else. They were all friends of Leon Hai around 300 p.m. The 7 people arrived at the waterfall and began their outing, enjoying swimming and playing together. However, Yun Sang-yup, who was very afraid of water, hesitated to join in despite. This Leon Hai insisted that her husband sit on an inflatable float. Cho Han-soo then pulled the float into deeper water, causing Yun Sang-yup to become extremely frightened. He repeatedly asked them to stop, but Cho Han-soo ignored his pleas and continued pulling the float farther out. Meanwhile, Leon Hai casually sat on the shore, enjoying the breeze as Yun Sang-yup struggled to paddle the float back to shore. Cho Han-soo shook the float vigorously. leaving Yin Sang up to helplessly beg for it to stop. This video was recorded around 6 p.m. It's evident that Yun Sang Yup was genuinely terrified of the water. After the video was shared on social media, it quickly garnered widespread attention, amassing over 5 million views within just a week, even surpassing interest in the South Korean presidential election at that time, returning to that day at around 8 p.m. As dusk was falling, the group was preparing to leave. Kim and his girlfriend Lee had already gone to the parking lot. However, at that moment, Lee Eun-ai suddenly suggested an idea to jump off the cliff into the river before heading home. So as not to waste the trip, Yun Sang Yup was clearly reluctant to take on this challenge, but with 4 out of the 5 remaining people agreeing, he was pressured to join them on the 13th high-jumping platform. The 2 men who agreed to jump, Cho Han-soo and Lee, both had unusual relationships with Leun. Hai, seeing her husband's hesitation, Leun-hai taunted his masculinity and even implied that she would do it herself if he didn't dare. Ultimately, Yun reluctantly agreed and jumped along with the other men. As you may already know, Yin Sang Up tragically drowned at this point. Cho Han-soo called the police when the authorities arrived. They retrieved Yun's body from the water. However, during this investigation, the police discovered that Lee Eun-ai was a habitual liar. She failed the polygraph test. She claimed she didn't hear her husband's cries for help, but Choi, who was with Lee at the time, confirmed hearing a loud scream. Furthermore, according to the forensic examination, numerous air bubbles were found in both of Yun Sang Yup's lungs. The bubbles were formed due to the victim's continuous struggle in the water. In simpler terms, after falling into the water, Yun Sang Yup repeatedly thrashed about in an attempt to save himself. The noise from such splashing would not have been quiet yet. No one claimed to have heard it. Cho Han-soo told the police that Yin Sang Yup's jump point was very close to where he was after noticing something was wrong. Choi and Lee Eun-ai went to look for a life preserver while Cho Han-soo swam to the spot where Yun Sang Yup had jumped into the water. Logically, in such close proximity, you would expect him to be able to find Yun. However, Cho Han-soo claimed he couldn't see Yun Sang Yup because it was too dark. Whether Cho Han-soo was trying to save Yun or harm him remains unclear after the incident, as Yun and Yup's wife, Lee Eun-hai, showed no signs of grief. Instead, she casually spent time with her lover and demanded $800 million, won approximately $600,000 from the insurance company. However, the insurance company wasn't easily fooled. They discovered that this insurance policy was just 4 hours away from expiring due to unpaid premiums, when right before it did, Yin Sang Yup suddenly drowned. Suspecting an insurance fraud, they immediately refused to pay the claim. This turn of events left Lee Eun-hai in a state of anxiety. She felt compelled to reach out to the media to accuse the insurance company. However, what Lee Eun-ai didn't anticipate was that her accusation would lead to severe consequences for both her and her boyfriend. Moreover, many people began to wonder what was the motive behind Lee Eun-ai driving her husband to his death. According to investigations, Lee Eun-ai was born in 1991 in Yangshi-dong, Incheon, South Korea, into a family where both parents were disabled. Living in extreme poverty, the entire family crowded into a small home of just 215 square feet, relying on government assistance to survive. Initially, Lee Eun-hai's family had no social standing and they were relatively unknown. However, in March 2002, their lives took a significant turn. A program called Sunday Night Love House, which helps build and renovate homes for those in need, reached out to Lee Eun-hye's family to offer assistance. At that time, Lee Eun-hye was just a 6th grader, appearing sweet, well-behaved, and obedient. Despite the family's poverty, she remained optimistic. She never looked down on her parents and dreamed of becoming a singer when she grew up so that she could take care of them and repay them for their care and upbringing. Lee Eun-ai even promised, "When I grow up, I will help those in need as much as I have been helped." After the program aired, her image as a kind, filial, and hard-working girl quickly won the hearts of the South Korean public. She was affectionately dubbed a little angel and became a model of the good child in the eyes of parents across South Korea. However, things soon changed. The angelic child from those days disappeared. Lee Eun-hye seemed to forget her dream of becoming a singer. According to investigations, at the age of 15, Leunhee began working as a sugar baby for a middle-aged man after receiving $160,000, one equivalent to about $120 from him. Leunhee felt that this was a way to make money without much effort, relying only on her looks through introductions from friends and the internet. She enticed and became a sugar baby for numerous men. However, once she had money, Leunhee paid no attention to her parents. It was during this time that she met Cho Han-soo, who was actually a pimp specializing in finding clients for her. They collaborated to make money and eventually developed a romantic relationship. Lee Unii even created a personal list for her clients where she recorded their characteristics and preferences. She also engaged in theft and other services to make money more quickly. This behavior made Lee unhigh. Irregular at the police station, facing multiple charges from a young age, Leunhee had to appear in South Korea's juvenile court 5 times and was investigated by the police on more than 10 occasions at just 19 years old. Leunhee became pregnant and gave birth to a baby girl with the father's identity. Unknown even while pregnant, she continued to frequent bars to lure men after her daughter was born. Leunhee heartlessly left her in the care of her disabled parents while she continued her lifestyle of partying and reckless behavior. Despite making substantial money through her sugar baby activities and scams, she spent it lavishly, always wanting the most expensive things, leaving her with no savings. Additionally, comparing her current appearance to childhood photos, it's evident that Lee has undergone numerous cosmetic surgeries in the following years. She continued relationships with multiple men, earning considerable money from them. In 2016, Leunhee met Yoon Yup, who was born in 1980, making him 11 years older than her from the photo. Yoon Sang-yup appeared to be kind and unassuming, which was true in reality. Yoon Sang-yup was always hardworking and meticulous. He worked as a researcher at a large company in South Korea where he had been employed for 15 years, earning an annual salary of 64 million won, which is equivalent to nearly $50,000. While this income didn't make him wealthy, it was considered quite decent in South Korea. Yoon Sang-yup treated Leunhee very well. Whatever she asked for, he was always willing to pay for while being frugal and never spending excessively on himself. He handed over his entire monthly salary to Leunhee. Later, they registered their marriage in the fall of 2016 by conventional standards. A woman who meets such a good man should be grateful, but for Leunhee, that wasn't enough. What she desired wasn't a good man or a decent family, but rather someone wealthy. After their marriage, she continually made demands to siphon money from her husband, and she succeeded every time. However, Yoon Sang-yup's excessive indulgence did not bring him happiness. Instead, it led him into tragedy. Their marriage was quite unusual. The two did not resemble a typical married couple after they were married. Yoon Sang-yup's parents gave him 100 million. One combined with borrowed funds, he was able to purchase a nice house, but even that wasn't enough to satisfy Lee Yoonhye's vanity. She used the excuse of not wanting her husband to endure a long commute to make Yoon Yup rent an apartment close to his workplace where he lived alone. The new house was reserved for her and her friends to gather. The couple only saw each other on weekends, but even on weekends, Leunhee would find reasons to avoid meeting her husband. As a result, their weekly meetings dwindled to just once a month. The couple did not have a wedding ceremony or a traditional bride procession. They simply signed the marriage registration papers before buying a house in Incheon. Yoon Sang-yup had never met Lee Yoonhye's family. It wasn't until one day when he couldn't find her that he decided to visit her parents, which was the only time he met them. The two families and their relatives never met each other, despite Yup's persistent urging. Leunhee always found excuses to avoid it. In general, she didn't want anyone to know that she was married. Even more puzzling was the stark difference in their lifestyles. While Leunhee frequently traveled, socialized with friends, and dined out daily, Yoon Sang-yup, after giving all his money to his wife didn't even have enough for basic meals. According to his colleagues, he became cold and withdrawn after getting married previously. He had never borrowed money. But after marriage, he frequently asked to borrow small amounts from colleagues, such as just 30,000 won, about 230. This suggests he was so hungry that he needed to borrow money just to buy a meal or a bottle of water, the text. Messages recovered by the police from Yoon Sung-yup's phone were truly shocking when made public. They left the entire country of South Korea in disbelief. For instance, on June 28th, just 2 days before his death, Yoon and-yup messaged a colleague saying that while he could eat at the company cafeteria during workdays, he had nothing to eat on weekends. Over the course of 2 weeks, he lost 31B. The car that Yoon Sang-yup financed was also entirely at Lee Yoon-hee's disposal. His responsibility was to repay the loan and cover the fuel costs. Despite all his efforts, Loon Hai was never as satisfied and constantly demanded more money from him to please her. Yoon Sang-yup even resorted to borrowing money with interest, including online loans. Fortunately, he ultimately didn't go through with these transactions. During the investigation, the police discovered that the money from the loans Yoon and Yup took out ended up in Lee Yoon-hee's pockets. In fact, over the 2 years since their marriage, Lee Yoon-hai demanded approximately $2 billion, one equivalent to $1.5 million from her husband. For various reasons, it could be said that this marriage completely transformed Yoon Sang-yup's life, leading him from a simple, peaceful existence to utter despair. But deceiving her unfortunate husband was not the extent of Lee Yoon-hee's cruelty. She had an even more sinister plan from the moment they married. She began plotting just 5 months after their marriage. Lee Yoon-hai started purchasing life insurance policies for her husband, eventually buying 4 policies with a total coverage of 800 million won. Due to finance difficulties, Loon Hai often fell behind on the premium payments. However, each time the policies were about to expire, she would manage to renew them just in time. This shows how much she valued these insurance policies. Unfortunately, Yoon Sang-yup, being the trusting and kind-hearted person he was, did not suspect anything and continued to follow his wife's wishes. Then came June 30th, 2019. For hours before the 4 insurance policies were set to expire due to unpaid premiums, the accident happened just hours before the policies were about to lapse. Loon Hai chose the late evening when visibility was poor and pressured her non-swimming husband to jump into the water. The 2 other individuals involved in this final act both had secret relationships with her. The person closest to where Yoon and Yup jumped was none other than Loon Hai's lover, Cho Han-soo. However, he pretended not to notice and made no attempt to save Yoon Sang-yup after the incident. Loon Hai and Cho Han-soo went to the basement apartment that Yoon and Yup had rented twice to clean up and remove all data from his computer. Naturally, she also forfeited the security deposit on the apartment and immediately terminated the lease. As the investigation deepened, the police uncovered even more shocking details. It turned out that Lee Yoon-hai had been planning to kill her husband for quite some time. In February 2019, at a farm in Yangyong, Kongan Province, Lee Yoon-hai mixed pufferfish poison into Yen Yup's food. However, the poison wasn't potent enough, and Yoon Sang-yup only suffered from a stomachache, fortunately surviving the attempt. The police also found chat records between Lee Yoon-hai and Han-soo, in which she clearly complained. "I used enough of the poison, but it didn't work." In May 2019, at a trout fishing spot in Jangai Province, Yoon and Yup, who couldn't swim, fell into the water by accident at that time. Loon Hai stood on the shore and did nothing to help him. Luckily, a friend of Yoon Sang-yup arrived just in time to pull him out of the water. The friend initially thought that perhaps Lee Yoon-hai didn't know how to swim, which was why she didn't jump in to save her husband. However, later on in a video that Lee Yoon-hee posted from another outing, it became clear that she was a skilled and confident swimmer in reality. This marriage was a trap from the start. Neither Lee Yoon-hee's family nor her friends knew that she was married. Even the friends who accompanied her to Gapong Valley that day were unaware, except for her accomplice Cho Han-soo. None of the others knew that Yoon Sang-yup was Lee Yoon-hee's husband. When introducing her husband, she simply referred to him as a close friend at this point. The investigation into Yoon Sang-yup's case was considered complete, but the investigation into suspect Lee Yoon-hai continued. The police discovered that she might be linked to other crimes before marrying Yoon Sang-yup. In 2016, Loon Hai had been married to 2 other men, and coincidentally, they met similar fate in 2010. Lee Yoon-hee's boyfriend at the time, Tim, was involved in a car accident at the Seao intersection in Incheon. Afterward, Lun Hai received a large insurance payout in 2004. 2014, this woman went on a vacation to Pattaya, Thailand with her fiancé, Mr. Lee, during a scuba diving trip. Her fiancé tragically drowned, as his fiancée Lun Hai once again received an insurance payout between 2016 and 2019. Lee UNH Hai engaged in several other insurance fraud schemes on December 13, 2021. The prosecution summoned Lee Unai and Hansu for questioning when they were called in for a second time. The two disappeared without a trace, triggering a large-scale manhunt on March 30th. 2022, South Korean police issued an official arrest warrant for Lee Unai and Cho Hansu, charging them with murder and insurance fraud. The case caused a public outcry in South Korea, with many people questioning why it took until 2022 for the case to come to light. Even though the incident occurred in 2019, people wondered if no one had been suspicious of Lee Unai earlier. In reality, there were suspicions, and some people had already begun investigating. There were also discussions about the case online, with some even suspecting Lee Unai. However, Lee Unai and Chansu were very active on the internet, and they quickly reported any negative comments. As a result, some video and posts were taken down, and in some cases, people were even forced to pay damages. This effectively kept the case out of the public. Until now, in truth, the renewed police investigation was largely driven by Lee Unai's insatiable greed. She had reached out to a television program to accuse the insurance company, likely never imagining that she was in effect incriminating herself. This case sparked widespread media coverage and launched a massive online search for the culprits on April 12, 2022. Busan police received a tip that someone had seen Lee Unai and Hansu at a restaurant in Gimjeong, Busan. The police immediately rushed to the scene, but unfortunately the couple spotted there were not the two suspects, given that this was during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. Everyone was wearing masks, which made identification difficult. However, the trip wasn't entirely in vain. When the police investigated the man who resembled Hansu, they accidentally discovered that he was also a fugitive. Wanted in another case, the South Korean police monitored the bank accounts and phone signals of Lee Unai and Cho Hansu, but since the arrest warrant was issued, neither of them had used their accounts or phones, indicating that they were well prepared for their escape. Interestingly, besides the organizations actively assisting the police in solving the case, several fan groups emerged in support of Lee Unai. Finally, on April 16, 2022, the police apprehended Lee Unai and Cho Hansu. The South Korean police reported that since early April, they had been surveilling the area near Samsung Station online. 3 of the Seoul Metro and Gwangjanggi province, they spotted images of Lee Unai and Cho Hansu. As a result, the police narrowed their search and began a methodical hunt, just as they were closing in on the suspect's hiding place. The police received a sudden call from Lee Unai's father, who informed them that the two were hiding in a nearby office building. The police quickly arrived on the scene and captured the suspects at a newly constructed office building in Dieng District, Gwaung. When arrested, both appeared exhausted and significantly thinner. The only belongings they had were a few bottles of water. During questioning, the pair revealed, "We always chose crowded city centers to hide." They believed that the most dangerous place was the safest. After their arrest, both were transferred to the local prosecutor's office in Incheon on October 10, 2022. Pro-prosecutors requested life sentences for Lee Unai and Cho Hansu for multiple attempts to murder Yunan, and for insurance fraud. They emphasized that the pair had planned to disguise the murder as an accident to cover up their crimes on April 26, 2023. The Seoul High Court sentenced Lee Unai to life in prison for murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Her lover and accomplice Chansu was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Lee Unai did not agree with the verdict and appealed on May 1, 2023, but her appeal was denied. Story 3 in Kuala Lumpur, the capital of Malaysia to the southeast of Kuala Lumpur, lies an area known as Bangsar. Within this area is an upscale residential neighborhood called Tunggu Hill. It's a place filled with lush green trees and a serene environment which has made it a home for the elite. However, even in such a perfect location, a horrifying dismemberment case occurred that shocked all of Malaysia. The case began on Wednesday, July the 7th, 1993. That day, a city worker was cutting grass along the roadside on Tunggu Hill, as he regularly did. This is an upscale residential area, quiet and with little traffic or foot traffic. As the worker bent down to cut the grass, he accidentally came across two black trash bags lying in the grass. Initially, he thought it was just litter left by someone passing by, but when he picked them up, he noticed they were quite heavy. Out of curiosity, he opened one of the bags and was shocked to see a severed human arm inside, terrified. He dropped the bag and ran from the scene. After running quite a distance, he still couldn't calm down. Panting heavily, he frantically called the police. He was so distressed that he could only stammer out, "I saw a dead body," and urgently requested the police to come to the scene when the police arrived. They were also shocked to find the bloody body parts in the black trash bags. They immediately realized this was an extremely brutal murder and dismemberment case. The police quickly cordoned off the area and conducted a thorough search of the surrounding areas. As a result, they found several more black trash bags in a nearby ditch and in the grass. Inside, they found parts of thighs, calves, a torso. The body parts had been left there for some time, and maggots were already crawling on them. However, thanks to the forensic pathologist's assessment, they determined that the victim was a woman about 30 years old. On the day the dismembered body parts were discovered, the police could not find the victim's head, making it very difficult to identify her 3 days later on July 11th. 1993, the police returned to the scene and conducted a thorough investigation. They eventually found two additional black bags. Some distance away inside were the remaining body parts, and the victim's head forensic experts pieced together a total of 11 body parts and confirmed that they all belonged to the same person. The victim's head was swollen, the face severely decomposed, the facial features distorted with the eyes nearly unrecognizable and the mouth agape as if frozen in a scream, creating a horrifying sight. Due to the severe damage, the victim's identity could not be determined from the face. At a dead end, the police had no choice but to turn to the media and seek help from the public. They released details about the victim's appearance, noting features such as 6 dental prostheses, well-manicured nails and eyebrows, and neatly trimmed pubic hair, in a bold move to quickly identify the victim. The police published a clear, unedited photo of the partially decomposed head in the newspaper. This image became one of the most horrifying and grotesque photos ever published in Malaysian media, leaving many viewers with an unforgettable psychological trauma. At that time, forensic science was not as advanced as it is today. The police were unable to reconstruct the victim's face from the severely damaged head to expedite the identification process. They took another unexpected step. The police approached a street artist at the Central Art Center, hoping he could sketch the victim's appearance based on the decomposed head. They chose this particular artist because he had previously assisted the police in solving a murder case involving a shaman through his painting. The artist's name was Amaran. After learning of the police's intentions, he agreed to help them find the real killer unconditionally. Amaran first studied the photograph of the victim's head, then accompanied the police to the morgue to observe the head. Firsthand, he even closed his eyes and used his hands to touch the head, relying on his sense of touch to feel the subtle contours of the victim's facial features. Although Amaran did not have formal training in art or attend an art school, his drawing skills were exceptionally advanced. Faced with an unrecognizable head, Amaran relied on his portrait drawing experience and vivid imagination to create 3 facial sketches of the victim. After 4 hours of focused work, he shared his thoughts, saying a person's hairstyle and makeup can significantly impact their appearance. While I couldn't perfectly capture the victim's appearance from a decomposed head, because makeup and hairstyling can drastically change a girl's looks, I believe that those who knew the victim will be able to recognize her from the simplest sketch in an interview Amaran mentioned after drawing the 3 portraits of the victim. I experienced a haunting feeling from staring at that horrifying head photo during the drawing process. Since then, I've stopped eating meat and switched to a vegan diet. But as an artist, I shouldn't just think about commercial work. I'm glad that I could contribute to society through my art. The police then quickly released the 3 portraits Amaran created from his imagination, which garnered widespread public attention. The portraits were simple without excessive detail, yet they clearly captured the overall contours of the face. A few days later, the police received an important phone call that became a key turning point in the investigation. The caller was a landlord from the Bangsar area who said a female tenant of mine has been missing for a few days, and I haven't been able to contact her. I saw the victim's portrait in the newspaper and felt it resembled my tenant, so I decided to call the police. After receiving this lead, the police immediately went to the house in the Bangsar area to investigate. When they arrived, they found the door securely locked. Despite knocking loudly, there was no response with the landlord's permission. The police decided to break into the house inside. They found no trace of anyone, but they did discover a photo of a female performer and a piece of paper with an address in Kota Baru, Kantan. Using the information on the paper, after several calls, the police finally managed to contact the sister of the tenant. The tenant's sister worked as a cashier at a karaoke bar in Petaling. The following day, she accompanied the police to the morgue to identify the body. This was an incredibly distressing scene for any ordinary person. The tenant's sister was ill that day at the morgue. She couldn't stop coughing and vomiting, however. After taking medication and resting, she reluctantly completed the identification process. After carefully observing, she confirmed that the victim was indeed her younger sister. She stated that her primary basis for identification was the neatly trimmed pubic hair of the victim. Her sister was a performer who often wore revealing outfits and performed suggestive dances to maintain her appearance and avoid embarrassing situations. Her sister had a habit of trimming her pubic hair. At that time, DNA technology in Malaysia was not well developed. The police took a blood sample from the victim's sister and sent it to Singapore for testing. The victim's identity was confirmed on July 21st. 1993, the woman was named Lily Chua, 30 years old, with the stage name A Little Red. She was a well-known performer at a popular local karaoke bar. Lily Chua was originally from Kota Baru, Kantan, and had been working in Kuala Lumpur for over 15 years. She was the youngest of 5 siblings, and the sister who identified the body was her closest relative. 7 years earlier, Lily Chua had married and had 2 sons. However, as the relationship between her and her husband deteriorated, their marriage lasted only 2 years before ending abruptly. Before that, Lily Chua worked as a seamstress in a garment factory that made costumes for karaoke bar dancers. During that time, she became drawn to the lively and glamorous entertainment lifestyle and was later introduced to a job at a karaoke bar to provide a better life for her children. Lily Chua sent her 2 sons to a care center at an orphanage. She worked diligently and passionately to earn money. After the tragic incident, her 2 sons in the orphanage were still unaware that their mother had been brutally murdered. According to Lily Chu's sister, a month before the incident, my sister and I, along with some friends, partnered to open a new karaoke bar in Parade Garden, Petaling. My sister, had finally realized her dream of becoming a business owner after years of hard work. Everything was going well, but then this tragic and ironic disaster struck. How could anyone be so cruel to a single mother? The police continued their investigation and reached out to Lily Chua's ex-husband to gather information about her. However, her ex-husband claimed that he hadn't been in contact with his ex-wife for years and had no motive to commit any crime. The police then broadened their investigation into Lily Chua's social circle and uncovered an important lead. It turned out that while she was alive, Lily Chua had been involved in an affair with a married man, and this illicit relationship had been ongoing for a long time. The married man's name was Michael, 33 years old. He had studied theology in Singapore and briefly worked as a missionary. He was currently a piano teacher. Michael had an intellectual, gentle, and refined appearance. Often wearing glasses, he and Lily Chua had met through a teacher-student relationship, as he had once taught her vocal music. Over time, their relationship evolved into a romantic affair, since Lily Chua was a star at the karaoke bar. Michael's father vehemently opposed their relationship, despite Michael eventually marrying another woman. He continued his affair with Lily Chua. Ultimately, Michael decided to maintain his family relationship with his current wife and wanted to end his illicit affair with Lily Chua. However, Lily Chua had invested a great deal of emotional energy and money into the relationship. She refused to accept the breakup easily, and their love triangle became increasingly entangled with no way out. When Michael's wife found out about the affair, she was furious and confronted Lily Chua, but Lily Chua was also fierce and sharp-witted. She wasn't about to let Michael's wife insult her without a fight. Lily had a fiery temper. She pointed her finger in her rival's face, hurling insults and even threatening to cut her into 100 pieces to prevent Lily from acting on her threats. Michael reluctantly continued the relationship, aiming to keep her mentally stable. However, deep down, Michael was constantly thinking of a way to end the unstable relationship. Once and for all, upon learning of the situation, the police believed that Michael had a motive for the crime and immediately brought him in for questioning during the interrogation. Michael admitted to having an affair with Lily Chua. The police then placed a photograph of Lily Chua's head in front of Michael for identification. He glanced at it briefly and stated, "I don't recognize the person in the photo." Michael claims, "I haven't seen her in over half a month." He also handed the police a note that Lily Chua had given him earlier. The note read, "I'll be going to Penang for 10 days and I'll contact you when I return." The sharp-eyed officer immediately noticed something unusual about the note. Michael didn't know Chinese, and there was no reason for Lily Chua to give him a note written entirely in Chinese. After several rounds of questioning, Michael couldn't handle the pressure, and the police exposed several inconsistencies in his story. Then, finally, he was officially arrested by the police on suspicion of murder. At this time, both Michael's wife and mother were also detained awaiting trial. His wife was 2 months pregnant at the time, but they were later released due to a lack of evidence on December 13th, 1993. 5 months after Michael's arrest, the case was brought to trial at the Kuala Lumpur Sessions Court Number 5. Michael was charged with murder under Section 302 of the Malaysian Penal Code. The case drew widespread public attention after being reported in the media. For a time, the Lily Chua case became a common topic of conversation. After dinner, people were shocked by the brutal nature of Michael's crime and were eager to know what punishment he would face before the trial began. Many media reporters and members of the public gathered outside the courthouse waiting for Michael to appear. Around 2 p.m. that day, he was escorted to the courthouse. As soon as he stepped out of the vehicle, he was surrounded by a crowd. Initially, he appeared calm, but as the trial proceeded, he couldn't hide his inner anxiety and grew increasingly tense after the prosecutor finished reading the charges. Michael immediately pleaded not guilty in court. The trial lasted 3 days, after which the judge announced a 2-month adjournment for a second preliminary hearing. Michael was denied bail and remained in custody awaiting trial. Despite more than 2 months passing, public interest in the case remained strong. Many were still eager to learn the final outcome of the trial. 2 months later, on February 2nd, 1994, the second preliminary hearing took place as scheduled. During this process, the case took an astonishing turn that left everyone in disbelief. Perhaps due to insufficient evidence, on February 28, 1994, the prosecution unexpectedly announced the withdrawal of the murder charge against Michael and replaced it with a manslaughter charge. The case was then transferred to the Kuala Lumpur Sessions Court. For further proceedings, at the time, anyone convicted of murder under Section 302 of the Penal Code would be sentenced to death. However, if convicted of manslaughter, the maximum penalty was only 25 years in prison. The sudden decision by the prosecution to change the charge caused public confusion and concern. This meant that even if Michael was found guilty, he would escape the death penalty after the charge was reduced to manslaughter. Michael changed his previous statement and eventually pleaded guilty in court. He firmly stated, "I accidentally killed Lily Chua because I was pushed to the edge." Michael then recounted the events leading up to the crime. He explained that on the night of the incident, my wife was not at home, but Lily Chua insisted on coming to my apartment after arriving. She wanted to be intimate with me, but I refused. She became very angry and started yelling with no other option. I tried to calm her down. Once she had calmed down, she went into the me completely naked, trying to seduce me. I didn't know how to handle the situation, so I reluctantly went along with her desires, and we had intercourse on the living room sofa. Afterward, I felt that things couldn't continue like this any longer, so I suggested we break up and end our illicit relationship. When Lily Chua heard this, she became extremely furious, lost control, and started hurling insults at me. She even threatened me, demanding that I return the car she had bought for me earlier during that time. I thought she probably felt like her world was collapsing because she had sacrificed so much for me. She had believed that we could have a bright future together, but all she got in return was my rejection. She felt that I had never valued her status, her profession, and had no intention of marrying her. In the future, she thought I only cared about material needs and was maintaining the relationship with her for temporary novelty and personal gain. After she said several more hurtful things, I became extremely angry and wanted to hit her, but thankfully I managed to restrain myself. I then tried to divert her attention by turning on the TV in the living room. But as soon as I turned around, Lily Chua out of nowhere pulled out a knife and attacked me frantically. I was shocked by the sudden attack and quickly tried to run away. Unfortunately, the knife still managed to slash my left finger, causing it to bleed profusely. I didn't expect her to be so crazed, so I began to fight back to take the knife from her during the struggle. I tried to restrain her arms, and we tussled from the living room to the bedroom when I found the right moment. I quickly snatched the knife out of her hand. In the ensuing scuffle, I unintentionally caused her death before I could react. The knife pierced her chest, and she fell to the ground, gasping for breath before she died. She used her last breath to say to me, "How dare you kill me?" At that moment, I could only helplessly watch as she took her last breath and passed away after the incident. I felt utterly panicked and terrified. I couldn't believe things had escalated to such a terrible extent. My whole body was trembling. I realized I had caused an unforgivable tragedy. I began to think about how to deal with the body, and eventually I made a bold decision. I dismembered Lily Chua's body into 11 pieces and placed the parts into several black trash bags. At that time, my apartment floor was covered in blood and stains. It took me a great deal of effort to clean everything up. I then carried the trash bags containing the body parts out of the apartment and drove to the secluded Tungu Hill to dispose of them. When I reached a suitable spot, I got out of the car to open the trunk, but a car passed by, causing me to freeze in place. After the car drove away, I discarded 2 of the trash bags in the roadside grass and later returned to the apartment to dispose of a few more bags at a more distant location. Returning to the apartment, I checked Lai Chua's handbag and took out all the documents inside, burned them, and flushed the ashes down the toilet. I then divided her clothes and handbag into several different bags to dispose of them. I kept her ring and necklace in my own bag. Once everything was done, I took a shower and went to sleep. Michael's confession was presented by his defense attorney in court as evidence supporting the manslaughter charge in his confession. He also stated that night was long and distressing because I kept thinking about the life I had taken with my own hands. Michael expressed belated remorse and deep guilt for his actions, but Lily Chua had a strong sense of control and possessiveness over Michael. Even after Michael got married and started a new life, Lai Chua remained stubborn, which indirectly led to the tragedy. Michael further stated Lily Chua repeatedly insulted, belittled, and humiliated my family. I couldn't bear her persistent harassment, psychological attacks, and severe threats. So I decided to end the relationship quickly. The prosecutor's decision to change the charge from murder to manslaughter was largely based on the defense's argument that Lily Chua was in an unstable mental state and that the emotional entanglements and physical threats she posed to her client played a role in the incident. However, the prosecutor expressed doubts about Michael's confession. They argued that the methodical way he disposed of the body and erased evidence suggested that Michael harbored deep resentment toward the victim. They contended that his actions that night might not have been the result of a sudden impulse, but rather a premeditated act. Everything known about what happened that night was based solely on Michael's account. The truth might not be exactly as he described, and there is a possibility that he had planned the murder in advance. On March 9, 1994, the Kuala Lumpur Sessions Court sentenced Michael to 15 years in prison for manslaughter. With the sentence starting from the date of his arrest, Michael immediately claimed that the sentence was too harsh. He did not accept the verdict and appealed to Kuala Lumpur Court of Appeal on December 3rd. 1994, the Kuala Lumpur Court of Appeal reduced Michael's original sentence from 15 years to 12 years. Additionally, Michael was ordered to pay 10,000 ring, it equivalent to about $2,300 at the time, to the victim's family, or face an additional year in prison. This compensation was considered a significant amount in 1994 after learning of her husband's crime. Michael's wife divorced him and terminated her pregnancy. She then moved away to start a new life. Years later, some media outlets revisited the upscale apartment where Michael had murdered Lily Chua. There were 3 units on that. Floor in Michael's apartment had a simple wooden door covered in dust for many years. All 3 apartments on that floor remained abandoned as no one wanted to live there. The atmosphere was filled with an eerie and gloomy vibe. Many residents chose to move out after hearing about the gruesome murder and dismemberment that had taken place there. The scenery at Tungu Hill, where Michael disposed of the body, remained just as beautiful and picturesque as before. In 2000, Michael was released early from prison due to good behavior. He changed his name and moved with his parents to a place where no one knew him. There were rumors that Michael continued his theological studies and became a missionary, following in his father's footsteps. Perhaps he wanted to spend the rest of his life atoning for the crime he had committed. As of now, it has been 24 years since Michael returned to society. No one knows his current name or whereabouts. Some people claim to have recognized Michael in a church, but he firmly denied his identity and quietly turned away. In real life, there are many illicit affairs that leave serious consequences, and there are often mistresses who demand recognition. However, few realize that life is about cause and effect. Everyone will eventually have to pay for the wrongs they have committed. Story 4, on May 14, 2001, a woman named Annie Leong in Singapore was about to end her marriage. All she needed to do was pick up a pen and sign the divorce papers, and she could finally put an end to the 7-year-long trouble relationship with her husband. But as she stepped out of the elevator, a sharp knife plunged into her chest. Perhaps even as she fell to the ground, she couldn't comprehend who wanted to take her life. So what exactly happened at that moment? Annie Leong was born in 1971 in Singapore. From a young age, she was known for being smart, beautiful, and beloved by her family and friends. At the age of 15, she met a man 4 years older than her at church who would eventually become her husband. His name was Anthony from that fateful meeting. Annie Leong and Anthony Lear developed feelings for each other and got married in 2008 and 1995 as she entered her new life. Annie Leong devoted herself to caring for her family, building a warm home, and taking good care of her husband. Her stable job at a bank further enriched their life. Together, their happiness doubled when their little daughter was born on April 13, 1997. Unfortunately, this picture-perfect life didn't last long. Anthony, though outwardly charming and ambitious, was actually incompetent and useless. With blind confidence in his abilities, he repeatedly attempted to start businesses only to face humiliating failures. Despite this, he stubbornly refused to give up. After several such attempts, he drained the family's savings and sank into debt. Annie Leong, who had initially quit her job at the bank to stay home and help her husband, was now forced to rely on her connections to return to work. She had no other choice, as life had to go on, and the debt still needed to be paid. If it were just his failed career, that might have been forgivable, but Anthony Lear's infidelity was far more reprehensible. Not only did he have an affair with a woman named Belinda Ho, but he also brazenly brought her to live in their home under the guise of being a business partner, while his wife and mistress lived under the same roof. Anthony Lear managed to juggle both relationships in this regard. He truly had a knack for deceit. Later, he found another partner named Marilyn Tan, and of course their relationship extended beyond business. Eventually, when their business ventures failed, they parted ways on bitter terms after a brief relationship. Although Anthony Lear was skillful at hiding his affairs and continuously deceived his wife. Over time, Annie Leong began to suspect something was wrong. By October 1999, unable to endure it any longer, Annie Leong took her daughter and moved back to her mother's house in 2000 after yet another failed business venture. Anthony Lear attempted to end his life by taking a large dose of sleeping pills. but he was discovered and saved just in time, despite all the hurt she had endured. Annie Leong went to the hospital to care for Anthony Lear. For after this incident, Annie Leong lost all desire to salvage the marriage she was determined to leave for the sake of her daughter's future and her own. In February 2001, Annie Leong officially filed for divorce and sought custody of their daughter. Naturally, Anthony Lee refused to agree. As a result, he continuously found reasons to delay the process, causing their already fractured relationship to become even more strained. Anthony Lear's refusal to divorce left Annie Leong feeling trapped, unable to escape. The years of torment had ignited a powerful longing for freedom in her, and she wanted to end the marriage as soon as possible by May 2001. Anthony Liu seemed to agree to the divorce, but tragically what awaited her was not freedom, but a horrifying nightmare. Around 11 p.m. on May 14, 2001, Anthony L. arrived at Annie Leong's residence at 923 Huggang Avenue. He told her that there was a real estate agreement that needed her signature as part of the divorce proceedings. Annie Leong lived on the 4th floor, and Anthony Law arranged to meet her on the ground floor. She brought her daughter down and was about to sign the documents when she realized she didn't have a pen. Anthony Lear suggested that she go upstairs to get a pen while he stayed with their daughter downstairs at this point. Annie Leong was quite annoyed. Why would Anthony Lear prepare the agreement but forget to bring a pen? However, determined to finalize the divorce quickly, she went upstairs to get one. Before heading up, she looked back at her daughter, not knowing it would be the last time she would see her. As soon as Annie Leong stepped out of the elevator on the 4th floor, a man wearing a helmet rushed at her from the hallway, wielding a long knife. He stabbed her repeatedly in the chest and then fled the scene. Despite her severe injuries, Annie Leong managed to crawl to her apartment door and knock. When her mother opened the door, she found her daughter collapsed in a pool of blood. Her mother's terrified screams caught the attention of Anthony Lahr, who was waiting on the ground floor. He immediately rushed upstairs with their daughter and desperately called out to his wife, who lay bleeding on the floor. The ambulance quickly arrived at the scene, but due to the severity of her injuries, Annie Leong passed away after a few hours of emergency treatment at the hospital. In cases where a spouse is harmed, the other spouse is often the primary suspect given the severe strain on their marriage. Anthony Lear was under heavy suspicion. However, he had an alibi while Annie Leong was attacked on the 4th floor. Anthony Lear was downstairs playing with their daughter, and several witnesses could confirm this at Annie Leong's funeral. Anthony Lear wept bitterly, expressing his profound grief. He told the press that he was a terrible husband, not only failing to take good care of his wife, but also cheating on her, losing money in business ventures, and plunging the family into debt. He even called himself a devil while referring to his wife as a kind angel. He blamed himself, saying, "If I had brought a pen, if I hadn't let her go upstairs alone, this wouldn't have happened to outsiders." Anthony Lear didn't hesitate to reveal his own faults, making it seem as though he genuinely mourned his wife and was truly innocent. However, as the investigation progressed, the truth began to emerge, exposing his dark side, despite having an alibi. Anthony Lear stood to gain the most from this tragedy. With Annie Leong's death, he inherited their shared home and secured custody of their daughter. This made him a prime suspect in the eyes of the police. Reflecting on his behavior during the initial questioning, the police found something peculiar. He had been very reluctant and uncooperative. Typically, a loving husband would be eager to assist the police in solving the case as quickly as possible, especially when his wife had been harmed. Additionally, the police found a newspaper at the crime scene folded into a small piece and used to wrap the weapon. The paper was dated April 31st. Coincidentally, the exact front page was missing from a stack of newspapers at Anthony Lear's home. This suggested that the missing front page could very well be the one found at the crime scene. When asked about this, Anthony Lear claimed he knew nothing about it. The police then sent the stack of newspapers to the lab for examination. The results confirmed that the newspaper found at the scene indeed came from Anthony Lear's home. This indicated that even if he wasn't directly involved in the attack, he was undeniably connected to the crime. Unfortunately, such circumstantial evidence wasn't enough to convict him. However, it at least gave the police a direction for their investigation. Consequently, the police focused their efforts on Anthony Lear. After several days of investigation, the police finally uncovered a crucial lead. Neighbors had noticed Anthony frequently gathering with a group of 5 young men, but these meetings didn't seem like typical friendly G-togethers. Instead, they appeared to be plotting something on May 18, 2001. Just 4 days after the incident, the police located 2 of the 5 young men. One was a 15-year-old named Egan, and the other was 16-year-old Gavin Jean. Wei, who had dropped out of school faced with police interrogation, Egan, still just a child, quickly cracked under pressure and confessed to murdering Annie Leong. He expressed deep remorse and claimed that Anthony Lear had coerced him into committing the crime. With this powerful testimony, the police formally arrested Anthony Lear that same day on May 19, 2001. Both Anthony Lear and Egan were officially charged with murder. However, the big question remained, why would Aeon willingly become a tool for someone else's murderous intentions? To understand this, we need to rewind to February 2000 at that time. Anthony met the 5 young men outside of McDonald's in the Pasar Ri area located in eastern Singapore. The group included 15-year-old Aeon, 16-year-old Gavin Jean Wei, 17-year-old Vic Nason Krishan, 19-year-old Kong K. Chong, and 22-year-old Kad Zuha. They quickly bonded as if they had found kindred spirits. Being the oldest, Anthony Lear naturally assumed the role of leader for the group. They began meeting more frequently. Then one day, Anthony Lear suddenly asked, "Are you guys brave?" This question struck at the pride of these young men who were in the midst of their teenage years. With the excessive confidence and enthusiasm of youth, they boldly declared that they weren't afraid of anything. Anthony Lear then pushed further, asking, "If you're really brave, would you dare to kill someone?" The young men initially thought this was just a joke, so they eagerly claimed there was nothing they wouldn't dare to do. One said he would do it for 100 Singapore dollars, while another said it would take 1,000,000 Singapore dollars for him to consider it. Anthony Lear calmly listened and glanced at each person before finally focusing on Aeon Egan. Appeared to be the most innocent, like a well-behaved student not wanting to be outdone by his friends. Aegon responded, "I'd do it for 10 Singapore dollars. At first, everyone thought this was all injustice, but they were shocked to realize that Anthony Lear was serious. Moreover, the person he wanted to kill was his own wife. Annie Leong. Initially, Anthony L. approached CIA, how the oldest in the group. He told him he would sell his house to pay CE. How for the job, it was only then that CE. How realized Anthony Lear was serious, so he immediately refused and suggested that if Anthony really wanted to go through with it, he should hire a professional hitman. Anthony asked CA how to find a hitman, but of course he couldn't. So he declined. At the beginning of May, Anthony Lear returned to CIA, How, and offered him 10 Singapore dollars to kill his wife. He even took him to his house and showed him a picture of Annie Leong. Anthony Lear told him that Annie Leong was very weak, so it would be easy to kill her as he spoke. He handed CIA How a knife and asked him to cut through a newspaper. He described Annie Leong's neck as being as fragile as that piece of paper, saying that one slash of the knife would be as easy as cutting through the paper. He even reminded CA how to wear gloves during the crime. To avoid leaving fingerprints, the plan was for CIA How to take Annie Leong's wallet afterward to make it look like a robbery. It was at this point that CIA How fully grasped the seriousness of Anthony Lear's intentions. However, he firmly refused, saying, "I won't do anything illegal afterward." Saya How considered calling Aeon to warn him not to get involved, knowing that Aeon was quite naive and could be easily manipulated. Unfortunately, he couldn't reach him. Anthony Lar then turned to 2 other individuals, Vikas Warren and Kong K. Chong. They still thought it was a joke, but every time they met, Anthony Lear would talk about killing his wife. They began to sense something was off. Later, one of them said, "I found it very strange every time we met, he would bring up killing his wife. I thought he had gone mad." Naturally, they refused to take on the task. Finally, Anthony Lear turned to Aeon. He described his plan to Aeon, assuring him that it was foolproof. With no room for error, he instructed Aeon to wear a helmet to conceal his face and gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints for the weapon. Anthony Lear provided him with a long, sharp knife that was easy to carry and long enough to pierce the heart. He advised Agan to wear long sleeves to avoid leaving any scratch marks that could serve as evidence. Additionally, Agan was warned not to smoke at the scene as the cigarette filter could retain fingerprints and saliva after completing the act. Aon was to take the wallet and any valuable items to make it look like a robbery. When leaving the scene, Aon was instructed not to panic or run, but to walk calmly to the bus stop and take a bus away from the area. Finally, he was to dispose of the weapon carefully, Anthony Lahr added after laying out the entire plan. Anthony Lear didn't forget to threaten the 15-year-old boy, saying this mix of threats and promises ensnared Aon. The naive boy agreed to carry out the murder plan. Anthony Lahr purchased 2 phone SIM cards so they could communicate secretly. Afterward, Aon visited Anthony Lear's apartment several times to receive instructions on how to kill Annie Leong on May 10th. 2001, Anthony Lear decided to take action. He led a gun to Annie Leong's residence at 923 Hang Avenue, a gun, put on a helmet, held a knife wrapped in newspaper, and hid nearby when Annie Leong got out of a taxi. Aon followed her up to the 4th floor. Shortly afterward, Annie Leong came back down, carrying her daughter to the playground, seeing her with her child. Aon couldn't bring himself to go through with it and abandoned the plan. After the first failed attempt, Anthony Lear immediately set up a second plan the next day. May 11th, Aon followed his instructions and returned to Annie Leong's residence. At this point, Aon wanted to back out of the plan, but Anthony Lear called him and ordered him to proceed. Aon walked around the 4th floor with a knife, but didn't see his target. As he went back downstairs, he saw Annie Leong and her daughter playing in the playground on the 1st floor. Seeing this, Agan abandoned the plan once again, with the plan failing twice. Anthony Lear became very angry and decided to confront Aon, but Aon told him he wanted to quit and didn't want to do it anymore with the plan. So close to completion, Anthony Lear, of course, refused to accept this. Knowing that Agan was fearful, he threatened him, saying at this point whether you do it or not is no longer your decision. If you insist on backing out, be prepared to find your parents and siblings dead. Out of fear for his family's safety, Agan felt compelled to continue with the murder plan. On May 14th, Anthony Lear arranged for Agan to come to his house to practice to stabbing. After some time, he ordered a gun to gear up fully and hide outside Annie Leong's apartment. Meanwhile, Anthony Lear would bring along a real estate agreement as a pretext to meet his wife deliberately, not bringing a pen. He used it as an excuse to send his wife upstairs while he stayed behind to watch their daughter. This way, Annie Leong would go alone and Anthony Lear would have a perfect alibi. It was a plan designed to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. This time, when Aon saw Annie Leong taking the elevator alone to the 4th floor, he was determined to carry out the plan following Anthony Lear's instructions. After committing the crime, he calmly walked to the bus stop and then took a taxi to the beach where he threw the weapon into the water. After the crime, Agan felt deeply uneasy and filled with regret. He confided in the other 4 friends about what had happened on May 17, 2001. Anthony Lear contacted Agan and arranged to meet at his house. During their conversation, Anthony Lahr was very cautious, fearing that they might leave evidence or be eavesdropped on. They communicated by typing on the computer. The content of their discussion was that Anthony Lear couldn't pay Agan yet, because it wasn't the right time. He needed to act shocked by his wife's death. After finishing their conversation, they deleted the chat. However, what Anthony Lear didn't anticipate was that his cleverness would backfire. The police were able to recover the deleted files from the computer from the clues they had gathered. The police identified Anthony Lear as the mastermind behind everything. He had orchestrated the entire plot, from the initial planning to coercing Agan into killing Annie Leong. His motive was to gain ownership of the house they shared and to secure custody of their daughter on November 19th. 2001, Anthony Lear and Aon were brought to trial at the Singapore High Court. Throughout the trial, Anthony Lear stubbornly maintained his innocence. He displayed a strange smile and showed no signs of remorse. He claimed that telling the 5 young men to kill his wife was just a joke. When the police asked him why he brought documents for his wife to sign but didn't bring a pen, he explained that he never had the habit of carrying a pen. The police then asked, So why didn't you go upstairs with your wife? Why did you keep your daughter with you? All of this seems too coincidental, he replied. I just wanted to spend a little more time with my daughter. There was really no other intention. In short, Anthony Lear adamantly denied plotting to murder Annie Leong. He even shifted all the blame onto Aeon, saying, "Don't be fooled by the fact that Aeon is only 15 years old. He's a ruthless criminal." He acted on his own in this regard. Aeon's friends and family vehemently opposed the accusations. They all stated that Aeon was naive, gentle, and compassionate. They insisted that if no one had coerced him, he would never have committed such a cruel act, and himself claimed that he acted under Anthony Lear's coercion. He had initially wanted to back out, but Anthony Lear threatened his family's lives for the sake of his family. Aeon felt forced to go through with the plan. He revealed the entire scheme that Anthony Lear had laid out for him, including the weapon, the method of the crime, and the escape route. Additionally, Anthony Lear's two former lovers, Marilyn Tan and Belinda Ho, testified in court. They stated that during their relationships with him, they had repeatedly heard Anthony Lear express his desire to kill his wife. Belinda Ho had known Anthony Lear since 1997. Throughout their 3.5-year relationship, she had wholeheartedly supported him both financially and with manpower as he tried to start business after business, but every venture ended in failure, leaving him with a massive debt. During their time together, they frequently argued. She recalled that Anthony Lear once said, "If my wife tries to take my daughter, I will definitely kill her." Marilyn Tan met Anthony Lear in October 2000. She also financed one of his business ventures, but it ended in the same way, another failure. Marilyn Tan once contemplated ending her own life. However, when Anthony Lear learned of her intentions, not only did he not try to stop her, but he also mockingly suggested, "If you don't want to live anymore, why not help me get rid of my wife while you're at it?" These testimonies, along with the earlier circumstantial evidence, led to Anthony Lear being convicted of instigating and conspiring to murder Annie Leong. Ultimately, he was sentenced to death. As for Aeon, who directly committed the crime, the judge considered him to be a naive teenager who was manipulated by Anthony Lear into committing such a serious offense based on the evidence and the fact that Egan was under 18. At the time of the crime, the judge did not sentence him to death, but instead handed down a life sentence. Anthony Lear couldn't accept this outcome and filed multiple appeals, all of which were rejected. He then petitioned the president for clemency, hoping to have his death sentence reduced to life imprisonment. But this request was also denied on December 13, 2002. Anthony Lear, then 35 years old, was executed at Changi Prison. In contrast to Anthony Lear's lack of remorse, Aeon was deeply troubled and genuinely remorseful for his actions. With extraordinary effort, he achieved excellent academic results and passed several exams. Moreover, Aeon earned a college degree while serving his sentence. His positive attitude and actions were recognized not only through his academic achievements, but also by being named a model inmate in 2013. Aeon submitted a request for clemency to the president, hoping for a pardon, but unfortunately it was denied. In November 2017, Aegon applied once more. This time, his plea for clemency sparked significant public attention in Singapore. His story of rehabilitation and determination quickly spread through the media, touching the hearts of many. As a result, a wave of public support for Aegon emerged finally on November 2nd. 2018, the president granted Aegon clemency, reducing the remainder of his sentence. After his release, Aegon successfully reintegrated into society to protect his privacy as a former minor. His identity was kept confidential and no images of him were ever published in the media. Therefore, his life post-incarceration was not overly affected by his past. Annie Leong's daughter, after losing her mother, was raised by her grandmother and later went on to attend college. However, the loss of parental love from such a young age is a wound that will likely never fully heal throughout her life story. 5 in the Osaka city, the capital of Osaka Prefecture, along the shores of Osaka Bay, lived a family. The husband, 52-year-old Professor Yasaka Fujimori, who was also an employee at a pharmaceutical company, and the wife, 46-year-old Mitsushiro Fujimori, a homemaker. They had 2 sons. The elder son, 21-year-old Yoshiro Fujimori, and the younger son, 19 years old. Both sons were college students, the family of Pharrell a stable life. However, one day the mother and the elder son suddenly disappeared without any explanation. Despite all efforts to locate them, the family received no news about their whereabouts. It wasn't until 5 years later, when a certain object was discovered, that the truth about their disappearance began to unfold. Where did they go and what happened to them? Let's go back to August 14th, 2011. To delve into the details, that day was just another Sunday at Higashi Tanoi Park, located in Tanoi Ward. Osaka, a horrifying event occurred. The park, which is a 5-minute walk from Wahamaki Station in Osaka, isn't particularly large and runs from north to south. Inside, there's a large grassy area, an ideal spot for local residents to relax during their free time, since the park has no surrounding fence and is open to the public at no charge. Anyone can enter or leave the park at any time around 7:30 a.m. That day, a sanitation worker was performing his usual cleaning duties at Higashi Tanoi Park. While sweeping, he came across a metal container lying on the ground, assuming it was discarded trash. He approached with the intention of cleaning it up. However, as he bent down to lift the container, he was startled by its unusually heavy weight. It seemed like something was inside. Upon closer inspection, he noticed that the lid was tightly sealed with tape. Out of curiosity, he peeled off the tape and opened the lid. What he saw was horrifying. As soon as the lid was removed, a foul odor filled the air. Inside was a human skull. Terrified, the sanitation worker quickly dropped the container, stepped back several meters, and tried to regain his composure. He immediately called the police. Within minutes, a large number of officers arrived at the scene, cordoned off Higashi Tuchi Park, and prevented anyone from entering or leaving the area. The crime scene investigation was conducted urgently. The metal container measured approximately 9.4 inches in length, 9.4 inches in width, and 13.8 inches in height, with a capacity of about 4.8 gallons. Since 4.8 gallons is equivalent to a 2, a traditional Japanese unit of measurement, this case became known as the 1-to-2 case. The metal container had a label from a pharmaceutical company inside the container. Besides the skull, the police also discovered a portion of an ankle bone. The container's opening was tightly sealed with several layers of vinyl tape, commonly used for pipeline corrosion protection, moisture prevention, and electrical insulation. It appears the perpetrator deliberately sealed the container to prevent the foul odor from escaping. Clearly, this was a homicide. However, with the evidence collected at the scene, especially with only part of the victim's remains, the victim's identity remained a mystery. Meanwhile, the police took a statement from the person who reported the crime. He stated that he was a sanitation worker at Higashi Tanoi Park and performed daily cleaning duties and collected recyclable waste each morning. That morning, when he saw the metal container in the grass, he intended to pick it up and sell it for money. It was only after opening it that he discovered the horrific scene. The sanitation worker also mentioned that there were a few people exercising in the park that morning, but he didn't notice anyone suspicious. Some of the locals questioned confirmed that they had seen the metal container when they arrived at the park for their morning exercise, but they didn't know when it had appeared and hadn't paid much attention to it. To gather more clues, the police searched the surrounding area using Higashi Tanoi Park as the center of their investigation. Their efforts paid off. At 2 p.m. that same day, on a street not far from the park, they found a second metal container. Compared to the first container, this one appeared older and darker. Inside, it contained several human bone fragments. The following day, some local residents reported to the police that they had discovered a third metal container in a parking lot about 100 mers west of the park. The police quickly arrived at the scene. The container was found to contain several fragments of a human ankle bone. Unlike the first container, the second and third containers were not sealed with tape, but their size and design were identical to the first one. As a result, the police believed that all 3 containers were likely discarded by the same person. Sometime later, the forensic examination results were released. DNA testing revealed that the bone fragments found in the 3 metal containers belonged to 2 people, a mother and her son, since only partial remains were recovered. The cause of death could not be determined. The time of death was estimated to be around 2006, approximately 5 years prior. The police then compared the victim's information with the missing persons database in Osaka from recent years. The results confirmed the identities of the two victims, 46-year-old Maita Shiro Fujimori and her 21-year-old son Yoshiro Fujimori. According to the records, the mother and son had gone missing in April 2006, over 5 years ago, back in May. 2006, Professor Yasaka Fujimori, Mitashiro's husband, had reported the disappearance of his wife and eldest son to the police. He explained that his wife and son had mysteriously vanished the previous month, and he suspected that they might have run away. The family also had a younger son, and Professor Fujimori didn't want him to grow up without his mother, so he sought the help of the police in investigating their disappearance. Professor Yasaka and Mitsushiro met and fell in love during their university days. After graduating with the support of both families, they quickly got married and moved into an apartment in Osaka. After his father passed away, Professor Yasaka inherited a printing company, providing the family with a stable income. His wife decided to quit her job and stay home to take care of the family. After she became pregnant later, they had another son. The family of 4 lived a very happy life. However, their happiness was short-lived. Professor Yasataka's printing company began to suffer losses, eventually leading to bankruptcy to cover the cost of living. He was forced to look for a job. He was later hired as a department manager at a pharmaceutical company. Although the income was stable, it was nowhere near the lucrative days of his previous company. Gradually, his wife started complaining about his meager income, which was not enough to cover the family's expenses. The couple frequently argued about money. During one heated argument, Mitsushiro loudly demanded a divorce and left the house. She believed her husband was incompetent, unable to earn enough to support the family. Initially, Professor Yasaka thought his wife was just venting her anger. He never imagined that Mitsuhiro would actually leave and take their eldest son with her. He had no idea where they had gone and only received a busy signal when he tried calling them. He searched everywhere they might have gone but found no trace of them. Professor Yasaka suspected that his wife might have had an affair and possibly eloped with her lover. He also mentioned that his wife frequently chatted online with an unknown man due to his job. He came home very late every day. He had assumed his wife was just bored and chatting online with friends for entertainment. Looking back now, he realized she might have been unfaithful initially. Professor Yasaka still hoped that his wife had left in a moment of impulsiveness and would return once she calmed down. But a month passed without any word from them, feeling utterly helpless. He finally went to the police, hoping they could help find his wife and son after getting a general understanding of the situation. The police proceeded to the school to take a statement from the couple's younger son. The boy stated that the atmosphere at home was tense, with his parents frequently arguing about money. His older brother always sided with their mother and criticized their father. He wasn't surprised that his mother left and took his brother, as she favored his brother. More that day, the boy was busy with an extracurricular activity at school, so he wasn't sure when his mother and brother left the house. Next, the police went to the Fujimori family home to investigate. There they discovered that most of the missing mother and son's clothes had been taken, making it appear as though they had indeed left home. The police reviewed surveillance footage from the surrounding area, but unfortunately the camera were obstructed and did not capture any images of the mother and son before or after their disappearance. Neighbors and friends of the two also reported that they had no knowledge of the situation and no one knew where they had gone. The police initially suspected Professor Yasataka's involvement in the disappearance, but due to a lack of evidence, the case was closed afterward. Professor Yasaka moved away. No one could have imagined that 5 years later the missing mother and son would be found in metal containers. In such a mysterious IOU's manner, some witnesses reported that a few days prior they had seen 3 men and a woman driving a small truck stopping at a parking lot. They had dumped a metal container into a trash bin before quickly driving away. Looking very suspicious, the police reviewed surveillance footage from the park's parking lot and nearby areas but found no trace of the suspicious truck, however. While scanning the footage, the police noticed a middle-aged man with a suspicious appearance in Higashi Tanoi Park on August 13th. The day before the first metal container was discovered, the man was seen pacing back and forth, looking nervous and holding a plastic bag. The police speculated that the bag might have contained the metal container. After conducting an identification, the police confirmed the identity of the middle-aged man. It was none other than 57-year-old Professor Yasaka Fujimori, the husband of the victim Mitsushiro and the father of the victim Yoshiro. According to the investigation, Professor Yasaka Fujimori was currently unemployed and living alone in an apartment near Higashi Tanoi Park. This apartment was directly across from the parking lot where the third metal container was found, separated only by a street. Professor Yasaka had previously worked at a pharmaceutical company with the same name as the label on the metal container. Based on the evidence and leads gathered, the police identified Professor Yasaka as the prime suspect in the case. They speculated that due to escalating marital conflicts, Professor Yasaka killed his wife. During an argument, his eldest son witnessed the entire incident, and to eliminate the witness, he ruthlessly killed his son as well. After covering up the crime, Professor Yasaka went to the police to report his wife and son as missing. To mislead the investigation, a month after the incident, the police arrested Professor Yasaka on charges of disposing of a dead body. When questioned by the police, Professor Yasaka claimed that he didn't remember anything about discarding the metal containers. He stated that he had quit his job at the pharmaceutical company 2 years ago due to health reasons and had been living off his monthly pension to save on living expenses. He moved into his current apartment. He mentioned that he often took walks in Higashi Tuji Park during his free time, describing it as a public park with many people passing by. Nothing suspicious about it. As for the metal containers, he claimed to know nothing about them, insisting that he hadn't seen any such containers since leaving his job. Of course, the police didn't believe Professor Yasataka's statements. They suspected that there could be more crucial evidence hidden in his home, as the 3 metal containers only contained part of the 2 victims. Remains: the police immediately searched Professor Yasataka's apartment. The apartment was located on the 2nd floor of a 5-story building covering an area of about 215 square feet. It was simply furnished with the entrance leading to a Janine area where shoes are removed before entering the home. To the left was the kitchen. To the right was the bathroom. Further inside were the bedroom and balcony. The police thoroughly searched every corner of the apartment but did not find any additional metal containers. It was discovered that Professor Yasaka had fallen into gambling around 2003. Despite his wife's repeated attempts to dissuade him, he squandered the family's savings on gambling. He then took out loans from the bank to try and recover his losses, but ended up losing everything again to repay the debt. Professor Yasaka went to an insurance company to cancel his life insurance policy in hopes of getting some money back. However, when he tried to complete the paperwork, he was shocked to learn that the policy had already been canceled, and the person who had canceled it was none other than his wife. Angry, Professor Yasaka confronted his wife at home and learned that their eldest son had been expelled from school because they couldn't afford the tuition. Their eldest son was attending a private university where the annual tuition was quite substantial. Since Professor Yasaka had become addicted to gambling, the family had fallen into financial hardship in order for their son to continue his education. His wife had secretly canceled his life insurance policy to pay the tuition. Upon learning this, instead of understanding his wife's actions, Professor Yasaka harshly criticized her for making such a decision without consulting him. The police speculated that during a heated argument, Professor Yasaka killed his wife. The conflict arose from their son's tuition fees, and in a fit of rage, Professor Yasaka may have killed his son as well. Fearing that his crime would be discovered, he dismembered their bodies and stuffed them into metal containers. Afterward, he quit his job and moved to his current apartment. Believing that after all these years no one would investigate the matter further, he carelessly discarded the metal containers. 3 months after the case was brought to light, the police arrested Professor Yasaka Fujimori once again, this time on charges of murder. This time he finally admitted to disposing of the metal containers but continued to deny killing. His wife and son, Professor Yasaka, claimed that on the evening of April 10, 2006, when he came home from work, the house was completely dark normally. By that time, his wife would have dinner prepared and ready for his return. Finding this strange, he turned on the lights and discovered that the door to his eldest son's bedroom was wide open when he walked in. He was horrified to find his son lying motionless on the bed covered in blood. On the floor next to the bed was a sledgehammer. Terrified, Professor Yasaka frantically called out to his wife, but there was no response. He then found her in the bathroom, lying motionless on the floor, already deceased upon closer inspection. He noticed that her right hand was clutching a sharp piece of broken glass, while her left wrist had a deep cut. Losing both of his loved ones at once, devastated Professor Yasaka, he believed that his wife had killed their son with the sledgehammer and then took her own life with the glass shard, possibly out of despair. Over their current situation, the police questioned why. 5 years earlier, when he reported their disappearance, Professor Yasaka hadn't mentioned any of these details and why he had dismembered their bodies and placed them in metal containers. Professor Yasaka explained that at the time of the incident, his younger son was away on a school trip. He didn't want his younger son to know about the tragedy. He then secretly transported the bodies of his wife and son to his workplace, where he used a power saw to dismember them and place the remains into metal containers. He then sealed the containers in cardboard, boxes with tape, and discreetly stored them in the company's warehouse. After everything was done, Professor Yasaka returned home and lied to his younger son, telling him that his mother had taken his older brother and left. At the time, his younger son fully believed him. 3 years later, Professor Yasaka's health began to deteriorate. He decided to quit his job before leaving the company. He retrieved the metal containers and brought them back home facing financial difficulties. Professor Yasaka was forced to move into a smaller apartment. His younger son moved out on his own, leaving Professor Yasaka to live alone in his current apartment. However, the apartment was too small to store the metal containers, so at the end of July that year, he divided the containers into several parts and disposed of them at different locations. He never imagined that everything would be uncovered so quickly. Professor Yasaka's testimony might sound reasonable, but there are too many suspicious aspects. First, when his wife and eldest son died at home as a family member, his first reaction should have been to find out the cause of their deaths. However, Professor Yasaka only thought about hiding the incident from his younger son. This is difficult to understand. Second, Professor Yasaka claimed he dismembered the bodies of his wife and son. Such an action is incredibly cruel and not something an ordinary person could do. Third, Professor Yasaka stated that he placed the body parts into 4 metal containers, but the volume of those containers would not have been sufficient to hold the remains of 2 adults. Lastly, hiding the metal containers in the company's warehouse was extremely risky. If they had been left there for a long time, they could have easily been discovered by someone else. The police wanted to press further and extract more information from Professor Yasaka, but from that point on, he refused to say anything. Remaining completely silent, he even refused to reveal the location of the 4th metal container. The police then visited the pharmaceutical company where Professor Yasaka had worked to gather more information. His former colleagues had mixed opinions about him. Some described him as a serious and meticulous worker who was very afraid of making mistakes. He was also sociable with his colleagues, always greeting everyone. Many people had a positive impression of him. The company's owner in particular held him in high regard in 2006. The owner's daughter died in a car accident upon hearing the news. Professor Yasaka remarked, "If something like that happened to my family, I would never forgive the person responsible." This showed that Professor Yasaka deeply cared for his family. Moreover, he frequently boasted about his eldest son to his colleagues, saying that his son was an amazing young man. However, some people describe Professor Yasaka as having a short temper. Prone to sudden outbursts, he also often mumbled to himself, appearing quite strange and difficult for others to understand. Additionally, Professor Yasaka was frequently late to work and sometimes even came to the office intoxicated. Initially, a kind colleague asked if he needed help, but Professor Yasaka lashed out at them. After that, no one dared to approach him and they kept their distance. In their ongoing investigation, the police approached the warehouse manager of the company to gather more information, but no one recalled ever smelling anything unusual in the containers, but the police had only found 3. So far, they suspected that the remaining container might still be hidden in the company's warehouse. The police conducted a thorough search of the warehouse but found nothing. The police then located the apartment in Osaka where Professor Yasaka and his wife had previously lived after obtaining the current owner's consent. The police conducted a search of the apartment. Luminol testing revealed a strong luminescent reaction on the floor in one of the bedrooms. Additionally, in the gaps between the floorboards and the baseboards, the police found traces of blood that had been cleaned but not entirely removed. DNA testing confirmed that the blood belonged to Yoshiro Professor Yasataka's eldest son. The investigation made significant progress, but the police still needed more evidence to convict Professor Yasaka while the police were struggling to gather additional proof. An anonymous woman who claimed to be a close friend of M. Shiro came forward with some crucial information. I stated that before her disappearance, M. Shiro often confided in her about her husband's gambling addiction. Ms. Shiro was deeply distressed and felt helpless. She mentioned that they were running out of money to pay for their eldest son's tuition, but her husband seemed unconcerned, only interested in indulging in his pleasures. Professor Yasaka frequently hung out at bars, coming home late at night, reeking of alcohol. When he returned, he wouldn't even bother to shower instead, passing out only to go to work drunk the next morning. Also revealed that after M. Shiro and her eldest son went missing, Professor Yasaka didn't show any signs of grief or concern, nor did he actively search for them. He continued to go to work as if nothing had happened. I found Professor Yasataka's indifference extremely strange and considered him to be cold-hearted. M. Shiro had often complained to her about being abused by her husband. Whenever things didn't go his way, Professor Yasaka would beat his wife. I believe that it wouldn't be surprising if Professor Yasaka, in a fit of rage, had killed his wife and son, the police, then visited the area around Professor Yasataka's current residence to gather more information. A pharmacy owner mentioned that he had lived in the neighborhood for decades and had never heard of such a horrifying case. He knew Professor Yasaka, who had come to his pharmacy to buy medicine. Professor Yasaka seemed very normal, and the two even had a conversation for a while. He never imagined that Professor Yasaka could be involved in such a gruesome crime. Another resident stated that Professor Yasaka lived alone in his apartment and his younger son rarely visited. As a result, they often saw Professor Yasaka walking alone in the park. Professor Yasaka rarely mentioned his wife and children to others, so people didn't know much about his family. The police continued their investigation by questioning Professor Yasataka's younger son. He described his father as a reserved and quiet person, which meant they didn't often talk to each other due to his own busy work schedule. He rarely visited his father. As a result, he had never seen the strange metal containers in the house, although he had some suspicions about his mother and brother leaving. He didn't look into it further. He felt that his mother always favored his older brother. His father's income was limited, and eventually they couldn't even afford his brother's tuition. But his mother still tried to make it work. She even went as far as canceling the insurance policy to get money for his brother. On the other hand, his mother had never treated him as well. So when his father said that his mother had taken his brother and left, he felt a bit sad, but he didn't dwell on it. He said, "There was a time when I really resented my mother because I felt she had abandoned me." The case garnered significant public attention after being reported in the media. Many people believed that the truth was not as straightforward as it seemed, given the numerous suspicious aspects of the case. Some speculated that the real culprit could be the younger son, who had attracted the least attention since his mother always favored his older brother. He had lacked maternal affection from a young age. Over time, this led to feelings of resentment towards his mother and brother. His mother canceling the insurance policy to pay for his brother's tuition only intensified his anger. This may have driven him to plan the murder of his mother and brother. At that time, the school had organized a field trip, which he saw as the perfect opportunity to act. He pretended to sign up for the trip, but secretly returned home that day. Instead of going out knowing that his father usually came home late from work, he decided to strike. Then he went to a store and bought a sledgehammer when he got home and saw his brother asleep in bed. He, in a fit of rage, swung the sledgehammer and struck his brother's head. He then went on to kill his mother after committing the crime. He panicked, discarded the weapon, and fled the scene that evening when Professor Yasaka came home from work and found his wife and son dead. He was overcome with grief and decided to call the police. But just then he received a call from his younger son. The younger son confessed the entire truth and begged his father to help cover up the crime. Initially, Professor Yasaka couldn't accept this harsh reality, but after some thought, he agreed to conceal the crime to protect his younger son's future under the cover of night. Professor Yasaka secretly transported the bodies of his wife and son to a deserted area and buried them. He then returned home, cleaned up the crime scene, and instructed his younger son to tell everyone that his mother and brother had run away. A month later, Professor Yasaka went to the police station to report his wife and son as missing. With the younger son's account, the police did not investigate the matter further. Professor Yasaka thought everything had been perfectly concealed. However, he never anticipated that the land where he buried his wife and son's bodies would be bought by a real estate company to develop a new project, fearing that his crime would be exposed. Professor Yasaka secretly returned to the site, exhumed the bodies, dismembered them, and placed the remains into metal containers. He then took the containers,